Apologies in advance, but this is a math-heavy episode. Don't worry, there's lots of pretty pictures and charts, and I'm here to explain it to you. But at the very end, I'll shut up and tell you what this actually means for your build. If you want to skip to then, no worries. Just getting started, this is based off a forum post I made and way too many hours of math that I did for this to make a lot of this stuff. Mostly just because I was curious for it myself, but if it helps out a few people, that's great. Bit of a background here, it's about damage over time and charts and numbers and how that stuff works. If you don't remember what damage over time is, and I've made a 2 or 5 minute video on it, go ahead and read this forum post, and it's by Templar. It's very useful. I'll leave a link in the YouTube description, or you can just pause it, whichever actually works for you. It's a good thing to understand for the weapons you're actually using on your ships. It's very important to have that baseline before you get into this. In essence, what a few of us were thinking is that there's a max number of stacks, 14,400, that every weapon type, or the 2 scatterguns we have, actually has in game. So, if you get, 40 of the limited scatterguns, you max out those stacks fairly quickly and are doing a maximum damage. What if instead you go with 20 limited, 20 unlimited, so 20 of the Bloodletter and 20 of the Spleen Blaster, and you now have 14,400 of each of those as max stacks. So instead of doing 2.1 million, which is the limited max damage over time over 8 seconds, now you have that 2.16 million for the limited stacks and 1.86 million for the unlimited stacks. Combine those together, you do more overall damage per second. Okay, the problem is with that, you ramp up slightly slower to do your damage faster, which is confusing, so here's the picture I was talking about at the very beginning. Now, this has a few things to note. First of all, it's from 0 to 2.5 seconds in time frame. Health is from 0 to 10 million, with the 20 time each limited, plus the 40 Spleen Blaster and 40 Bloodletter. What you'll notice is purely limited is always better than purely unlimited. In fact, the most optimal build will in any scenario have at least half of the weapons limited. It might only be half, it might be all of them, it just depends a little bit. Now what you're seeing is that in these first few seconds, before the curve starts just going straight for the yellow and red lines, the blue line is an average of the other two, which means your risk is minimal for doing this. Past that, once those straighten out, we'll get more into this at the end, the blue line actually goes higher and does more damage in the same amount of time as the yellow one. That turns out to be, in this case, 2 seconds and 8 million health, give or take a tenth of a second or so. Okay, so if the targets have over 8 million health, you want to use the split weapons. Well, it's not quite that complicated. There's one more thing we have to jump into, and that is the assumptions we are making. And we'll start out with the build, and I will come out with a more detailed thing on this. This is going to be a very common, probably one of the best 2 options for a build out there. It's really standard. You go with this build, you will not go wrong. It's definitely a maxing out the supercharge and multi-shot for this thing, rather than focusing on just plain corrosive damage, because you do such little corrosive damage anyway. You have 10, 15, 20 times as much damage coming from the damage over time as from the corrosive damage itself. That's really important to realize. Now, maybe it's not realistic to say your ship's at U3, let's not use the +2 multi-shot from the U3, and let's say we're running 4 antis across the entire fleet, knock down the scattergun numbers to 36, knock out interception system to make sure nothing funny is going on with this being a really specific niche idea, and replace it with something else random that doesn't affect either of these things differently, such as combustion system 2, which I was actually looking at for a while. We do that, and we get a graph that looks like it has the same exact shape, which is true, but the time frame, instead of going from 0 to 2.5, is 0 to 4 seconds. Damage goes up to either the same amount or slightly higher. What you'll notice here is now this optimal point where the split weapons perform better than just the pure limited ones is at 3.2 seconds or so, 3.6 actually, and is about 10 or 11 million health. So, if the ships have greater than 10 million health, you're better off going with the 18 times each rather than the 36 times, just like that. And what this has done is it's shifted everything over to the right. Now all the curves take longer to ramp up a little bit, and have a slightly slower growth once you get past their ramp up max stacks potential. Hopefully that's not confusing you too far. You might just be saying, okay, no big difference either way. I think the targets will have more than 8 million, more than 10 million health, so I'll just throw on all of the limited ones. Well, it's not quite that easy, and there's one last thing we do have to talk about, that is the Absolvers. Now, Absolvers are not damage over time, they're straight up regular damage. Every time you reload, you'll do 131,000, which seems small just because of the PvE chopping off 3 zeros essentially that happened, so it's a lot of damage that is done over a very, very short reload of roughly 0.7 seconds. Straight up damage, no damage over time, no hit and run, don't have to worry about anything. Let's add this to our graph and see what it looks like. Holy cow, this line is way higher than all the others. That means I should just go with the green one automatically, right? Well, not really, because this line only goes out from 0 to 4 seconds. If we went up 0 through 8, it would look different, and this blue line would catch up, the yellow one, and even the red one would catch up in some scenarios. So, there's a few other things we do have to talk about here, which is the total damage from one volley. How the Absolvers work is you shoot at something, one volley, run away, it only does that one volley damage, which turns out to be 4.8 million. Okay, let's take the damage over time. You shoot at it once, and it does a very small amount of damage, around 60 to 80,000 depending on your stuff, and then it does 2 million plus damage over, actually more like 7 million damage, over the next 8 seconds, taking every 0.6 seconds. Which means that the limited and the damage over time in general is going to do more damage. At the same level, U3 and all the same guns controlled for everything, it's looking more like between 7 and 8.5 million damage compared to 5 million damage. So just one volley here doesn't do a whole lot. And here's these numbers I've been talking about. Just 5 million damage from the Absolvers compared to ranging from 6.7 to 8.6 for the damage over time stuff. So if you're going to hit and run, shoot at something and run away, the damage over time looks to me on paper to be way better. Well, not way better, but reasonably better, enough that I definitely want to go for that. But if you're just going to shoot at something till it's dead, and stay in range of that the whole time, continue on to the next one, shoot at it till it's dead, you're far better off going with the Absolvers. Well, you know what shooting at something and waiting till it's dead before moving on to the next thing looks like? Yep, that sounds like autoing. So if you want to auto, Absolvers could be a great thing to keep in mind. Okay, the last two graphs I'm going to show you how to deal with the rate of damage, or damage you're doing every second, which is the damage over time, if you do have damage over time, plus the damage from every volley. Turns out, if you look at this, it really helps you understand the rate at which things are maxing out and you're hitting max stacks. So if I told you to look at this graph and the red line and tell me when it maxes out, you're going to say roughly 1 second. It's a little bit later. It's kind of smoothed out, so it looks a bit different than that. But that'd be right. You hit max stacks after about 1.8 seconds or so with the 40 Splint Blaster. Same story. The yellow line here is flat after 1.8 seconds, and that's when it hits max stacks with this particular build with U3 and limited stuff, as well as interception system and that and 40 weapons on the entire fleet. So that's when it maxes out there. But you don't see the damage maxing out on the combined 20 each, because again, max stacks 14,400 for these. You can add the yellow line of 2.1 plus the red line of 1.86 together, and you get the blue line of just under 1 million. Okay, that's how much damage you'd be doing every second if you have max stacks with the blue build. Then again, the green one, which is the Absolvers, is not a fair comparison because once you stop shooting, this thing drops to 0, and the others would continue on declining slightly, but it's the area under this that would matter. Not really a fair comparison. Don't just build the green because it's higher on this chart, which is why I'm talking to you about this. And that's just another visual that helps you understand. Let's take a quick look at what would happen if you had no U3 and no interception system and only 36 weapons. Very similar graph. This time the green line is slightly lower because it's impacted a little bit more by those changes we just mentioned. And you can see a bit more clearly with the straight up linear rather than smooth graph that the blue line is a combination of the slope of the yellow one and the red one. which I thought was interesting. Okay, now I'm going to stop talking and talk a bit more about the math. Math is over. I'm not going to talk about that anymore. And just tell you what this actually means for your build and what you're going to want to do. And I am realizing it's actually been 10 minutes into this, which was a bit longer than I intended on this being. Basically, Kixeye generally likes, and for the past 2 years, they've liked the new limited stuff to always be the best thing, and then the unlimited new stuff to be the second best, and the old stuff to not really be worth considering. But I think it's different this time, and I cannot see an easy solution that Kixeye could do to fix some of this stuff from a game design perspective. They could just delete the unlimited one, but that wouldn't work well. They could change the stacks so they don't have a split stack. They could do some weird things, but I don't really expect that to happen. So option number one is you go with straight up corrosive build right here and just do normal damage with the Absolvers, no damage over time, don't worry about stuff, and auto things. This has the risk of Kixeye doing things so this doesn't work quite as well, and that's the largest risk to this one, as well as underperforming if you want to drive. If you want to go for the split weapons build, which is 4 or maybe 3 in an anti, compared to 8 or 7 in an anti of the Ravagers shown on screen, then you probably are okay regardless. Because Kixeye has to make the targets so you can possibly complete them with the unlimited, that's a hard word to say, with the unlimited Spleen Blaster Scattergun. It has to be possible to do the targets with that one. Might not be quite as easy, but the difference between this red line and the yellow line are very small. Plus, even if targets end up having, say, 5 million health, you're still going to kill them 0.1 seconds later, so it doesn't really matter which one you go for, the split build or not. So the big takeaway is strongly consider the Absolvers for autoing. I would probably do that myself, except people like to see me drive these targets, I guess, so I'm not going to go for that. I'm going to build the split build myself. I've convinced myself this is possible. Based on some numbers I've been running through watching TSM's video, as well as a few others out there, we've actually coined some of these ships or used tokens on some of these ships. And based on my own numbers with Zealots and how many shots it takes to kill something, to kill a turret in a ship, it looks to me like the health is in the range of 10 through 15 million, which is quite literally off the chart. We'd go up here, follow this over, and would take about 3 seconds to kill something. Blue line would definitely be the fastest and have the most benefit. So it looks to me like that's going to be a pretty good option. And if I'm wrong and targets have 3 million health, well, guess what? We'll kill them in 2 shots anyway. It won't really be an issue. And in that case, the Absolvers would definitely be better anyway, which I don't really want to get into. My point is, the downside of going for just the split build is very, very small, because at worst, it's going to do the average of all limited and all unlimited, if that makes sense to you. At best, well, the best is technically, the upside is technically unlimited, and you can do quite well if something has 20, 40, 50 million health. It's going to be way, way better. Of course, we do not know what the flagship looks like and what the X1 upgrades look like, which will be, I'll only have the X1s in time for the second raid. More of you will have it in time for the first raid. But a few things to consider out there. This is not set in stone. It's just sort of a thought experiment I'm putting out there, something that I wanted to share with you, the community, see if it's helpful. If it's not, oh well. And for what it's worth, I think that this actually seems like fun, like a strategy game, like choices. Something's not always better, and I've only actually used basic calculus here. So I'll go ahead and leave you on that note. Thank you to everyone who supports the channel. Their names are on screen right about now. Anyway, thank you for watching to the end of this a bit longer video than I intended, and as always, this is Derpy, signing out, helping you be a better pirate.